Every house has a room it doesn't want you to find. Not a hidden room, not a false wall, or a trapdoor, or a safe behind a painting. Those are movie rooms, fantasy rooms, rooms that exist to be discovered. I'm talking about the other kind, the room that sits at the end of a hallway, in plain sight, with a door that is not hidden, but is closed. And that closedness is so loud, so specific, so architecturally enforced, that every person who walks past it adjusts their route, the way water adjusts around a stone. They don't avoid it consciously, they just never go there. The Valenti estate has 43 rooms. I know this because Mrs. Fontaine counted them during my orientation on day 1. 43 rooms, each assigned a cleaning schedule, a product specification, and a temperature note. She walked me through every floor with the precision of a woman. Who has turned housekeeping into a branch of military intelligence? She counted 43, but there are 44. The 44th room is on the 3rd floor, east corridor, past the library, past the secondary study, at the end of a hallway that narrows slightly, not architecturally, but energetically, as if the house itself is discouraging approach. The door is dark oak, the handle is brass. The brass is not polished because no hand touches it, and I know this because I polish brass. An untouched brass has a specific oxidation pattern that cleaned brass does not. And my grandmother taught me to read a room by its surfaces, the way a doctor reads a body by its skin. Nobody told me about the door, not Mrs. Fontaine, not the 2 other maids, Risa and Joanna, who have been here 3 and 5 years respectively, who showed me the linen closets, and the service kitchen, and the back stairs that Mrs. Fontaine warned me about, with the expression of a woman who was looking at my hips and commenting on the architecture. The back stairs are narrow, she said. I've been taking stairs my whole life, Mrs. Fontaine. The stairs will manage, she blinked. I have that effect on people who expect me to apologize for occupying space. I don't apologize. I occupy. It is one of my better qualities. My grandmother said so, and she was a hospice volunteer for 30 years, and she knew more about occupying difficult spaces than anyone I have ever met. Nobody told me about the room, because nobody tells the new maid things that matter. The new maid gets linen schedules and cleaning caddy assignments, and a master key that opens every door in the house. Every door, except one. I didn't find the door on day 1, or day 5, or day 8. I found it on day 11, at 11:47 p.m., because I was finishing the East Corridor, a late shift, covering for Risa, who had a toothache, and I walked past the end of the hallway and heard a sound through the wood. Not a voice, not a conversation, not music, not television, not any of the normal sounds a room makes when someone is inside it, living a life. A thud, low, heavy, the sound of something solid hitting hardwood, the sound of a body falling. My grandmother said, the door that's locked the tightest is the one somebody's trapped behind. She said this in the context of hospice patients who refused visitors, who turned their faces to the wall, who put up every barrier a dying person can construct against the unbearable vulnerability of being seen at the end. She sat outside those doors. She knocked once. She said, I'm here if you need me. And then she waited, sometimes for hours, sometimes for days, until the door opened. Because the door always opens. Because the people who lock themselves in are not trying to keep you out. They are trying to keep themselves together. And eventually, the keeping becomes harder. Then the letting. I reached for the handle. It was unlocked. The tarnished brass turned without resistance. And I understood, the way I understand dust patterns, and folding angles, and the temperature of a room that tells me whether someone has been inside it in the last hour, that this door was supposed to be locked, and it was not. And the reason it was not was that the person inside had not had time. I pushed the door open. Let me tell you about the 11 days before the door. Day 1. Mrs. Fontaine met me at the service entrance. At 6 a.m., she smelled like lavender and authority. She walked me through the house at the speed of a woman who has given this tour so many times that the words have worn grooves in the air. Linen closets here, silver pantry there. The family kitchen is off limits between 7 and 9 p.m. The dry cleaning is collected on Tuesdays and Fridays. And Mr. Valenti does not like to be acknowledged in the hallways. You step aside. You do not make eye contact. You do not speak unless spoken to. Has anyone ever spoken to him? I asked. Mrs. Fontaine looked at me with the expression of a woman who has just been asked whether water runs uphill. Mr. Valenti's private affairs are not the staff's concern. I noted the word private. I noted the way she used it, not as a description, but as a fence. Day 3. I met him. Luca Valenti walked past me in the main hallway at 8:17 a.m. on my 3rd day. He was wearing a 3-piece suit, the color of storm clouds, and he moved through the corridor, the way a weather system moves through airspace, without adjusting for what was in its path. I stepped aside. I clasped my hands. I lowered my eyes. Mrs. Fontaine's protocol, and he passed me, 3 feet away, close enough that I could smell cedar and espresso, and something metallic underneath, something pharmaceutical, the faintest ghost of something sterile. And he did not look at me, not avoided, not deliberately ignored, did not look, the way you don't look at a wall sconce, or a banister, or the thermostat in the hallway. It exists. It functions. It does not require your attention. I was furniture. This did not bother me. I spent 4 years as a home health aide in a brownstone in Brooklyn, caring for a 91-year-old man named Leonard, who had vascular dementia, and who called me the girl for 3 years, and called me Marin once, on the last day, when his daughter was crying in the hallway, and he took my hand, and he said, very clearly, Marin, tell her I'm not afraid. I am accustomed to being invisible. I know the value of it. Invisible people see everything, and I was seeing things in the Valenti house that the other staff had stopped noticing, because familiarity is the enemy of observation. I saw that the library, Mr. Valenti's favorite room, according to Mrs. Fontaine, had a chair angled toward the window, with an indentation in the leather that suggested hours of sitting. But the books on the shelves had no fingerprints on their spines. He sat in the library. He did not read. I saw that the master bedroom was immaculate, but cold. The bed made with hospital precision, the pillows untouched. No personal items on the nightstand, no photographs. The room of a man who sleeps there, the way a passenger sleeps in an airport chair, technically, reluctantly, with one eye on the exit. I saw that the 3rd floor east corridor had a temperature differential, 2 degrees cooler than the rest of the floor, and a faint electrical hum behind the walls. That suggested additional climate control, the kind installed for medical equipment, or server rooms, or environments that need to be maintained at specific conditions for specific reasons. And I saw the door. Day 4. I was vacuuming the runner, and I reached the end of the hallway, and there it was. Dark oak, brass handle, oxidation pattern, consistent with years of no contact. I stood in front of it for 5 seconds. I felt the temperature drop. I heard the hum. I walked away. But I remembered. Day 11. 11:47 p.m. I was finishing Risa's corridor. The east wing was quiet. The family kitchen closed at 9. The staff retired by 10. The guards changed shift at 11. The house at midnight was a different animal than the house at noon. Quieter, heavier, the walls closer, the shadows older. I was pushing the vacuum along the runner when the cord reached its limit, and I stopped to reposition. And in the 3 seconds of silence, between the vacuum dying and my reaching for the plug, I heard it, through the door, through the dark oak that nobody touches, a thud, heavy, low, the sound of weight hitting wood, without bracing, without the catch of arms, or the controlled descent of sitting, the uninterrupted sound of a body meeting a floor. I have heard that sound before. Leonard, in the brownstone, year 2. He was reaching for a glass of water, and his legs gave out, and he hit the kitchen floor. And I was in the hallway, and I heard it, and I was in the room, before the glass finished rolling. My body moved, before my protocol did. Mrs. Fontaine's voice, Mr. Valenti's private affairs are not the staff's concern, played in my head like a recording, and I noted it. And I filed it. And I walked past it. The way I walk past every sign that says, "Do not enter." When the sound behind the sign says someone is on the floor. The handle turned. The brass was cold. The door opened inward. The room was not what I expected. Not a trophy room, not a weapons cache, not a safe, not a shrine, not any of the dark things I might have imagined behind a locked door in a house owned by a man whose last name is spoken in courtrooms and whisper networks. It was a decompression chamber, sparse, clinical. The blackout curtains blocked everything. The light was blue-tinted, medical grade, the kind I recognized from Leonard's neurologist appointments. A single leather armchair, a side table with 3 objects, a glass of water, a smooth gray stone, a clock with a second hand, a weighted blanket folded on the chair, and on the floor, 2 steps inside the door. Collapsed against the base of the chair, Luca Valenti, not unconscious, not injured, not bleeding, something worse, something I recognized immediately, because I had seen it in Leonard's bad nights, in the hospice patients my grandmother sat with, in the bodies of people who are fighting a war that has no enemy, and no front line, and no ceasefire. He was in crisis. His hands were gripping the edge of the chair seat. His knuckles were white, not the white of exertion, but the white of a body, redirecting every resource to the task of staying in one piece. His chest was heaving, rapid, shallow, the breathing pattern of a person whose nervous system has tripped its own alarm and cannot find the off switch. His head was bowed. His jaw was clenched, so hard that the tendons in his neck were cords. His eyes were squeezed shut, sweat at his temples. Luca Valenti, 6'4", 230 pounds. The man who walked past me in the hallway, like weather, was on the floor, and the room he built to manage this was 3 steps away from the chair he was supposed to reach, and he hadn't made it. And the door he was supposed to lock was open behind me, because his hands were too numb to turn the brass. I closed the door behind me, quietly, completely. I set the cleaning caddy down, without sound, and I knelt. I did not touch him. My grandmother taught me this. You do not touch a person in crisis without permission, because a person in crisis has lost control of everything, and the last thing they need is another variable they did not choose. You make yourself small. You make yourself low. You make yourself a surface they can anchor to if they want. Not if you decide. Mr. Valenti, my voice was the voice my grandmother used. Low. Steady. The speed of a clock's second hand. My name is Marin. I'm the new maid. I'm on the floor with you. You don't have to open your eyes. You don't have to speak. You just have to breathe. His breathing didn't change. Rapid, shallow, the air going in, but not down, catching at the top of his chest. Like water hitting a dam. I'm going to count, I said. I'm going to count backward from 5. You don't have to do anything. Just listen to the numbers, that's all. Just the numbers. I counted. 5. Tell me 5 things you can feel. I paused. You don't have to tell me out loud. Just find them. The floor under your knees. the chair under your hands, the fabric of your shirt, the air on your skin, the weight of your own body. His breathing hitched. Not worse, different. The rhythm disrupted, which is the first step, because a disrupted rhythm can be redirected. 4 things you can hear. The clock on the table, my voice, the hum of the air system, your own breathing. Listen to it. Hear it. It's still going. You're still here. His grip on the chair changed. 1 degree. The fingers loosened a fraction, not releasing, but shifting, from desperate to deliberate. 3 things you can see. When you're ready. Not now. Whenever you're ready. His eyes opened, not wide, a crack. The dark brown, almost black, found the floor first, then the base of the chair, then, slowly, my knees. He did not look up. He looked at my knees on the hardwood, 2 feet from his, and his breathing changed again. Longer, deeper, the dam lowering by inches. 2 things you can smell. The wood of the floor, the cedar. It's you, your aftershave. It's still there. A sound came from his chest. Not a word, an exhalation. The first full breath that went all the way down, past the chest, past the dam, into the base of his lungs, where air is supposed to live. One thing you can taste. Anything. The air, the salt. It doesn't matter what it is. Just one. He swallowed. His eyes closed again, but differently. Not clenched. Closed. The jaw released. The tendons in his neck went from cords to muscle. His hands opened on the chair seat, and his fingers were shaking, but they were his. Again. I sat on the floor. I didn't move. I waited. The clock on the table ticked. The second hand went around 11 times. 11 minutes. Before he spoke. How long? His voice was destroyed. Gravel and glass. How long have you been here? Since the counting. Before the counting. Maybe 30 seconds. I heard the fall from the hallway. The door was unlocked. His eyes opened. Fully this time. And the look he gave me. From the floor. From the lowest point. A man like Luca Valenti has ever occupied. In front of another person. Was not anger. Not embarrassment. Not the cold authority he wore like a 3-piece suit in the hallway. It was terror. Not of me. Of the fact that the door was open, and I was inside, and I had seen the room, and the floor, and the stone, and the blanket, and the man who built an empire on the principle that vulnerability is extinction. You saw nothing, he said. I saw a locked door, I said. I heard a sound. I came in. That's all anyone needs to know. You don't understand what you're. I understand exactly what I'm looking at, Mr. Valenti. I spent 4 years as a home health aide. I specialized in patients with anxiety, PTSD, and neurological conditions. I have sat on more floors than you have rooms in this house. I have counted backward from 5, so many times. I can do it in my sleep. I paused. What I saw in this room is a man who has been managing a medical condition, alone, in silence, for what looks like a very long time, and who didn't make it to the chair tonight, because the door takes 2 seconds to lock, and the episode didn't give him 2 seconds. That is a health concern, not a secret. And I am not interested in secrets. I'm interested in the fact that you're still on the floor, and there's a glass of water on that table, and your hands are shaking. He stared at me. The terror in his face shifted, not disappeared, shifted, recalculated, the way a man's expression changes. When the variable he expected, blackmail, leverage, exposure, is replaced by a variable he did not account for, competence, without agenda. The stone, he said, quietly, on the floor, near your knee. I looked down. The smooth gray stone from the side table had rolled off at some point. It was sitting on the hardwood, 1 inch from my kneecap. I did not pick it up and hand it to him. I did not push it toward him. I set my hand beside it, palm up, the way you offer a choice to a person who has had every choice taken by the thing in their chest, and I waited. He reached for it. His fingers were still trembling. He closed his hand around the stone and held it, tight, then tighter, then loosening, the way my grandmother held her rosary during thunderstorms, and his breathing settled into something that resembled rhythm. 11 days, he said. Excuse me? You've been here 11 days, and you're sitting on my floor, counting backward from 5. Like you've done this before. I have done this before, many times, for people who deserved it less and needed it more. I don't deserve it. That wasn't an assessment, Mr. Valenti. It was a fact. The floor is the floor. The counting is the counting. Deserving doesn't enter the math. I stayed on the floor until he could stand. 14 minutes total. I did not help him up. I asked if he wanted assistance, and he said no. And I accepted the no, because the room was his. The floor was his, and the standing up had to be his. He stood. He was taller from below than he was from beside. 6'4" of a man, reassembling himself, the way a building reassembles after a tremor. Checking walls, checking load-bearing beams, testing the structure before putting weight on it. The door locks from inside, he said. I install it. I installed a secondary lock. I didn't reach it. I know. The brass was cold. It hadn't been turned. He looked at me. You read brass. I read surfaces. Every surface tells you something about the person who touches it, or doesn't. What does my surface tell you? That you've been alone in this room for a long time, Mr. Valenti, and that being alone in it hasn't fixed the thing the room was built for. He didn't argue. He didn't dismiss. He held the stone in his hand, and he looked at me with the expression of a man who has just heard a diagnosis he already knew, spoken by a woman kneeling on his floor in a maid's uniform, with the clinical precision of a physician and the patience of a hospice volunteer. 11 days, he said again, like a number he was trying to balance. Good night, Mr. Valenti. I picked up my caddy. I walked to the door. I opened it. Marin. I stopped. He had never said my name. 11 days. Not once. The new girl. That was what Mrs. Fontaine called me. The new maid. That was what the guards said. Nobody said Marin. Thank you. 2 words. From a man who built his world on silence. 2 words that cost him more than the 3-piece suit, and the estate, and the 44 rooms combined, because thank you is a transaction, and a transaction means the other person provided something of value, and acknowledging value means acknowledging need, and Luca Valenti does not acknowledge need. You're welcome, I said, and I closed the door behind me. The next morning, I walked the hallway at 8:17 a.m. with a coffee tray, his routine, his corridor, the corridor where he passes like weather, and the staff step aside. He came around the corner. 3-piece suit, jaw set, hair combed, the man from the floor, reassembled into the man from the hallway. All architecture, no earthquake. You would never know. No one would ever know, except me, because I saw the floor, and the floor is the truest surface in any room. He saw me, and for the first time, in 11 days, he did not pass. He slowed, not stopped, slowed. The way weather slows when it encounters a pressure system it did not expect. His eyes moved to mine. His dark brown found my green, and the look lasted 1 second, maybe 2, but in that second, the hallway was not a hallway. It was the room, the floor, the counting, the stone in his pocket. I could see the bulge of it, the weight he was carrying, because a woman on the floor gave him something to hold, and he had not let go. I set the coffee on the hallway table. I continued walking. He said nothing, but the silence was different. Not the silence of a man who doesn't see his furniture. The silence of a man who has been seen at his worst, by a woman who counted backward from 5, and is now walking down his hallway, as if the most important thing in his life is the coffee temperature. And she is right. And she knows she is right. And that rightness is the most disorienting thing he has encountered since the door opened. 1 week later, 9 p.m., I was finishing the East Corridor, my corridor now, permanently, reassigned by Mrs. Fontaine, without explanation, which meant Luca had given the instruction, which meant the man who built his world on locked doors had made a staffing decision based on the woman who opened one. I reached the end of the hallway, the dark oak door. It was ajar, 2 inches, the blue light, visible through the gap. He had left it open, not unlocked, open. The difference is a continent. I knocked, once, my grandmother's knock, soft, unhurried, the knock that says, "I am here if you need me. Come in." His voice was steady, no gravel, no glass, the voice of a man who is in the chair tonight, not on the floor. I opened the door. He was sitting in the leather armchair, the weighted blanket across his legs, the stone in his hand. Cleaned, I noticed. And I recognized the cleaning, because I had cleaned it myself, and left it on the side table, 3 days ago, without note or comment. The clock ticking, the blue light steady. He was not in crisis. He was in the room, by choice, with the door open, for me. "I have a question," he said. "I may have an answer. You spent 4 years as a home health aide. You have a degree in health sciences. You are overqualified for this position by approximately 3 professional tiers." He looked at me. "Why are you a maid, Marin?" I set the tray down, the glass of water, the stone I had brought as a replacement, a second one, found in the garden, the same weight, the same smoothness, because 1 stone in a room is a tool, and 2 stones is a choice. Because my grandmother was a hospice volunteer, I said, and she taught me that the most important work happens in rooms nobody enters. She didn't sit with dying people because it was prestigious. She sat with them because they needed someone in the room. And when she died, I looked at my career, the clinical rotations, the hospital placements, the institutions, and I realized that every room they put me in had 17 people in it. Doctors, nurses, specialists, interns, 17 people, all qualified, all watching, all there. I paused. But the room at the end of the hallway, the one with the locked door, and the patient who won't speak to anyone, that room had nobody. And I decided I'd rather be in the room with nobody than the room with 17. He turned the stone in his hand. "You chose locked doors. I chose the people behind them." He did not ask me to sit. I sat anyway. Not in a chair. There was only 1 chair. And it was his. And the room was his. And I was not going to take up space that belonged to his process. I sat on the floor, cross-legged, the way I sat with Leonard on his bad nights, the way my grandmother sat outside hospice doors, low, patient, available. He looked down at me, from the chair, from the height of a man who has spent his life looking down at people, and has never once seen someone choose the floor. "You're on the floor again," he said. "The floor is honest. You can't fall off the floor. My grandmother used to say that. Your grandmother was right." The silence settled. Not the silence of the hallway, the professional distance, the architectural boundary, not the silence of the hospital chair from the last story, or the silence of a man who does not know how to say a name. This was a different silence. The silence of 2 people in a room that was built for 1. Discovering that it holds 2, the clock ticked. The stone turned in his hand. My tea cooled against my palms. And the room at the end of the hallway, the room nobody entered, the room that existed to contain the one thing Luca Valenti could not let the world see, was no longer locked. Not because I opened it, because he left the door ajar. 2 inches. Enough. I'm not going to tell you what the room became. Not yet. You'll have to come back for that. But I'll tell you this. There are 2 stones on the side table now. One is his, the gray one, the original, worn smooth by years of gripping. The second is the one I found in the garden, and placed there without comment, and he has never mentioned it, and I have never explained it, and it sits beside his, like a sentence, neither of us has finished, and Mrs. Fontaine, who has run this house for 15 years, on the principle that the locked door stays locked. Walked past the third-floor corridor last Tuesday, and saw the door ajar, and saw the blue light, and heard, through the gap, two voices, his, low and rough, saying something about a grandmother, and mine, steady and warm, saying, "Tell me." And Mrs. Fontaine, for the first time in 15 years, did not report it. She adjusted the temperature on the thermostat. She walked away, and she left the door exactly as she found it, 2 inches open. Enough. If you are the woman who enters locked rooms, the woman who kneels, who counts, who sits on floors, beside people who have never let anyone sit, I made this for you. Hit subscribe. Share this with the woman who chooses the room with nobody. And tell me, did you pick stay or walk away? Because my grandmother would have picked stay. She would have sat on that floor, and she would have counted backward from 5, and she would have said, "I'm here if you need me." And then she would have waited, because the door always opens. New story every week. Hit the bell, and if you want to know what the second stone means, you'll have to come back for that.